Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the January 16th winter edition of Farm Office Live. Excited that you could join us on a cold, snowy day across the state of Ohio to learn more about farm management and ag law and taxation information. As always, I'm David Marison, and I will be serving as one of your moderator and one of your instructors for today. First off, I would like to introduce our team. Our team, Farm Office team, is Bruce Clevenger, Ellen Essman, Peggy Hall, Jeff Lewis, myself, David Marison, Robert Moore, Eric Reeker, Clint Schrader, and Barry Ward. Most of our members are on today, but also we have a few bouncing around the state or will be leaving halfway through to bounce around the state to teach. And we're so excited that, as always, we have a few special guests joining our team today on Farm Office Live. And the first is Josh McBride, who is the Chief Credit Officer for Ag Credit. So good morning, Josh. And then also Garth McDorman, who is OSU Extension Educator in Allen County. So we're glad that they have joined us to be part of today's program. I just want to quickly talk about the topics that we have on today's agenda. First, we're going to just jump right into our guest with Josh on the balance sheet errors, looking at areas for improvement. And then we'll pivot to the federal side to talk a little bit more about the Farmer Bridge Assistance Program and some federal farm program updates and some program updates that our producers across the Ohio will want to make sure they're tuned into. And then we'll look back at 2025 with some advice of where to keep our management focus for 2026. We've had some questions about mediation and arbitration and clauses that we can include into our rental agreements and different contracts. So our legal team is going to talk about that. And of course, it's tax time. We're going to hear in 2 weeks, we're going to be able to submit our taxes. So we want to make sure that we talk about those 1099 tax updates that occurred because of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And then to close, again, we'll update you on those winter programs that we have. Just a few housekeeping items that we have for you today. Again, if you would like to receive the slides, for those that have some slides for today's program, you can go to go.osu.edu/farm office live, the slides, as well as the recording from today's event. When we complete it today, we'll upload that recording. So if there's something that you missed because you had to walk away and do something else, you can come back and you can watch that. Or if there's something you would like to revisit, as well as know that you can go on that website also and see any of the previous editions of Farm Office Live, all the way back to 2020. And just a reminder, if you have questions, we are open to those questions. If you see the Q&A feature on your Zoom panel, that's where you can ask those questions. We'd be happy to answer those either live online or behind the scenes, or maybe we'll interface with you with an answer if it's a little more complex via email. And know that we'll be dropping different items in the chat feature. So if there's links that we talk about or other publications that we want you to be able to access, we're going to drop those into the chat. So be watching for your chat for those links that we drop in there. So without further ado, I'm going to stop my share and I am going to turn the program over to my esteemed colleague, Barry. Barry Ward is going to lead our lender discussion. So good morning, Barry.
Good morning, David. Thank you. Thanks
You're
for
welcome.
the handoff. And it's a pleasure to be with all of you and so many familiar names and a few new ones. So we're happy to have you with us today. And we're going to talk a little bit about financial statements. And the one in particular today is going to be the balance sheet, which some of you, many of you, have filled out over your own careers. So we're happy to have a guest with us today, as well as one of our own. And I'm going to introduce them in turn. First of all, Josh McBride is with us from Ag Credit, and we're certainly happy to have Josh with us. He currently serves as a Chief Credit Officer for Ag Credit since 2023, and prior to that, he was with Ag Credit since 2014. He has a couple of degrees from Ohio State and a degree from Findlay University, University of Findlay. So he has a significant background and education in this area, and we're sure happy to have Josh with us. He's also a friend of our team too. We know we've worked with him in various areas as well as he's been an active member of our Ag Lender seminars over the last few years. Clint Schrader is also with us today, and Clint is currently serving with us as the program manager, Ohio Farm Business Analysis and Benchmarking. And if you're familiar with the FinPac program, he oversees a team around Ohio to work with producers to put together farm financial analysis in different forms. So Clint, and he also is the owner and manager of Schrader Farms in Leipzig, Ohio. And we're happy to have him. Clint also has a degree from Ohio State, so we've got a lot of Buckeye background with this team. So happy to have you both. Thanks for joining us and being with us and sharing your thoughts. We're going to talk about a little bit on balance sheets, and we're going to also talk about some questions that we asked at our Ag Lender seminars this last fall that Bruce leads. But before we get into that, I'm going to ask you both to give a little bit of a statement, if you will, and it can vary, of course. Josh, I'm going to start with you about the importance of this financial statement, the importance of a balance sheet.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Barry. This is something that's near and dear to our heart here at Ag Credit. It is probably the one thing that we put the most emphasis on at year end when we're getting year end financials. We really try to get these year end balance sheets. I think every year, I try to do some rough math here. We probably get 2 to 3 thousand balance sheets every year. So educating our lenders on how to, when you get these, what to look for, the questions to ask. That's a big part of our training here at Ag Credit. So it's something that we really put a focus on.
Thanks, Josh. Clint?
Yeah, so obviously, as a lending institution, this is probably going to be something that they're requiring for any loan that they're doing. But we do work with some farms with our program that carry no debt, and so I think in those situations, it's easy to overlook the basics of the things that you need to do. But it's a balance sheet is still just so crucial to understand at a snapshot in time, and if you do it every year on the same date, you can track that farm's growth and the changes over time. And so I think that's the real value is that starting point of seeing how that farm, is changing from year to year.
Yeah, some great background there. Just not only the financial statement itself and the importance, but also the trend. I think that's a critical piece. Okay, we asked some questions, and I'm going to get into these and a couple more, but I want your thoughts if you don't mind. Um, I'm going to guess, and I know Clint's answer to this as far as the requirement to have balance sheets from the people that he works with, because Clint, correct me if I'm wrong, you need one basically at the beginning of the year and the end of the year for the farm financial analysis. Can you
Yeah,
talk a
that's
little bit
correct.
about that particular process?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do with a beginning of the year balance sheet and an end of the year balance sheet is start to make those accrual adjustments and track those inventory changes over the course of the year. So, that's really in our program to participate, it's a must-have. It's not something we can kind of work around. And I think there are some challenges, especially if you haven't done the exercise before and you're trying to remember back a year ago, okay, well, how many bushels did I have in storage or whatever it might be? Right off the bat, if first go around, the balance sheet might not be perfect, but we have tools to kind of work through that and kind of get that squared up where it needs to be.
Okay. I'm going to move then back to Josh and ask what is your typical requirement? I'm going to guess for most of your clients, you're going to require a balance sheet once a year. And I know that there may be a few and a handful for every financial institution that you have longtime customers that maybe don't have any debt. Maybe you don't require as
Yep.
frequent of a balance sheet, but when do you require those balance sheets and what do they look like? Are they market based, cost based?
So we kind of got two different buckets. First of all, for anybody new to us, we're going to require a balance sheet up front. So that's for every customer that comes to us that's new. Once they're with us, it's kind of more of a risk-based approach. So, smaller accounts, we may only require it every 3 years. Whereas you start to get to some of your larger operations, we're going to require it every year. That way we can track, the year-to-year changes, try to do accrual adjustments, reconcile to earnings, and have a pretty accurate picture of what that operation did for the year.
And I'm going to guess that you have financial officers across your institution that have different levels of assistance needed for your different clients.
That's correct. Yeah, we have account officers that are kind of the front line working directly with the customers, and then we have what we call the back line credit analysts that work on a lot of our largest accounts. So a lot of times we're tag teaming those accounts to get all the information we need, get it analyzed, and try to figure out what's going on. So yeah, that's kind of how we're set up.
Okay, super. Um, Accuracy is where we're going to go next in terms of, this kind of follows from what you both discussed. You know, it's it's difficult, I think, for us that work with farmers and producers to sometimes encourage them, nag them, if you will, into
Right.
not only doing the appropriate record keeping necessary, but also putting together these financial statements, whether it be a balance sheet, an income statement, or maybe a cash flow uh, summary or statement projection. So, what kinds of things? And one of the questions that we asked at our AgLender seminar was, how accurate do you think current balance sheets are coming from farmers? And the answer generally in that particular question from our lenders that attended were mostly moderate accuracy. Around over half the responses were that. Um, about a fourth, about 25%, indicated that the producers had highly accurate balance sheets when they began to work with them. So it's a mixture, right? And I'd like your thoughts, and I'll start with you, Josh. What are some of the things that typically you really have to do some further ask further questions, go and do further research through the farmer's records, perhaps? What parts of the balance sheet typically are a little lacking?
I apologize. Are you there? I think I froze up for a second. Can you hear me?
Yes, I
Yeah.
All
can.
right. Yeah. All right.
Hopefully it wasn't me, but what are some of what's the
Yep.
probably the area of the balance sheet that's requires more analysis or more backing and looking at records?
Yeah. So to your point, I'd concur with probably on average we rate it moderate. Obviously, it's the wide range. You got some that are very detailed, and you got some that when we send out the previous year balance sheet form to update changes, they'll say no changes, same as last year. So, that's the low end there that you really got to work with. But the majority of our time, most of our areas we see are on the top half of the balance sheet. So when you're talking about current assets, current liabilities, um, it's nothing that they do on purpose. None of them are doing it on purpose. It's just more of
Sure.
an education thing. And sometimes, as these operations get more complex, I mean, you basically got to have an accounting background to
Mhm.
know exactly how to list everything. So, although we try to educate, it's just difficult, and that's not what they do on a day-to-day basis. It's determine if something's a payable, receivable, where they should list it.
Yeah.
If they've have grain sold and it's on delayed pay or DP, then, there's a difference there, and it's how you account for all that. That's where we spend a lot of our time trying to reconcile. Sometimes we joke we're like forensic accountants going back and trying to piece everything together, but yeah, that's spend a lot of time doing that.
I bet you are. Yes. I mean, there are a handful, there are a certain percentage of producers out there that do enjoy the work of record keeping and putting together financial statements, but they're certainly in the minority, I would guess. So yes, this is typically the one of the least favorite functions that they do. Clint, can you share some of the things, your challenges that you see?
Well, for starters, I just want to appreciate that I'm not the only one that gets a balance sheet back that says no changes from last year, because
Yeah.
that does happen. And it's like, come on now, nothing changed on the farm over the course of the year. So we do see that. You mentioned the current assets, current liabilities. I think that's obviously one we look at pretty close. The other thing that I find a lot of times is you'd mentioned cost versus market value, and so Barry, we try and include both lines, a cost value and a market value. And for us to kind of come up with a cost value on a lot of our equipment or buildings, we really kind of go off of when it was purchased and a percent adjustment every year for depreciation to come up with that cost value. Finding the information of when did we purchase that tractor and what did we pay for it sometimes can be a challenge. So, starting out to get those cost values. But I see that a lot on intermediate or long-term assets where, oh yeah, we sold that piece of equipment and we forgot to take it off the balance sheet. Or the other extreme, working with someone that bought a combine, they hadn't taken possession of it, but they had paid for it and it wasn't on their balance sheet. And that's a pretty big chunk of change if you've went out and bought a combine and they paid before the first of the year, but it wasn't on the farm. And like you said, it wasn't an intentional error. They just didn't maybe know the best way to list that. So
Sure. Well, that brings up a question that I always have when I've worked with farmers in the past, as far as how to determine asset depreciation, especially those pieces that we're looking at, equipment, buildings. What do you do in working with some of your clients, and do you have rules of thumb? Certainly, they're not doing an appraisal each year on these longer lived assets to determine a value. Josh?
Yeah, so on the equipment side, we're a lender. We may be a little different than how Clint handles it. We have a program where we take somebody's full equipment listing, especially if we have it as collateral, and we'll put it in there and get recent auction values, and we'll take the average of all the auction values to get true numbers for our collateral purposes. Um, that's so whatever, no matter what the borrower, will provide us, we'll leave their values in there, and then we'll do our own set of values to the right
Okay.
of that, and that's kind of how we handle those.
That's more than what I think I knew. So that's interesting to note, and thank
Yep.
you.
And then on the real estate side, if there are buildings or improvements, obviously we'll have appraisals. So we'll go off of whatever our appraisals are shown at that time.
Okay. Clint, how do you handle that?
yeah, so we like I said, our cost value is calculated once we get that original cost value. We do a depreciation on equipment is 7% a year, titled vehicles is 15, and buildings are 5%. So every year we just take a percentage off of that cost value. The market values, we generally don't move much unless we have that conversation with the farmer on the equipment. And I think that was interesting. Josh mentioned using auction values. Sometimes when I get balance sheets, the market values listed as, whatever the farmer can go to Tractor House and they're looking at a like tractor and what it's listed for sale today, and that's the number they put in the market value. And sometimes I think that we have that conversation, or is that maybe a little bit too high? If you were going to try and sell this, how long would you be sitting on that piece of equipment if you listed it at that price? How quickly would it move? So some of those things do come up, but again, that's where, we really use that cost value to try and come up with a more firm number that's got a standard process. And then the market values are sometimes a discussion point on, when can we adjust those down, especially as, the last 2 years we've seen land prices increase, but machinery values maybe decrease some, and so they're kind of moving in opposite directions. And how do we make those changes?
What are those rules
That's
of
it.
thumb again that you mentioned, the percentages for each category?
So machinery and equipment is 7%, titled vehicles at 15, and buildings and improvements at 5% every year.
a rough idea, but at least a starting point that you can consider. And I'd like Josh's idea. I know many do this. There's a lot more data out there online that we can access, right? So we can be amateur or maybe even a little bit above that in terms of our own appraiser. And of course, most of the lending institutions, including Ag Credit, have an appraiser team that works in this area. So you have that backing as well.
Yeah. I should mention a majority of our balance sheets are market value based. So we're starting with the market value.
As most lending
Yeah.
institutions do focus
Yep.
on market-based balance sheets. And for those that are interested in more background on balance sheets, we have a good fact sheet that's online. So if some of this, and I apologize for jumping right into this, I know many of you are well versed on here on a balance sheet, and some of you maybe not. But Clint, did you and Eric put together a fact sheet on a balance sheet?
Unfortunately, I can't claim that distinction. That was my predecessor, the
Okay.
great Diane Shoemaker,
All right.
that
So
put that together.
we do have a fact sheet or two and some articles out there on that if you're looking to actually go back and read more. Okay. I appreciate this. I think one of my toughest was always trying to determine the depreciation of those assets. So I appreciate your thoughts on this. And uh, what about farmland? How are we treating farmland these days? Not only in terms of valuing the asset, but determining the collateral of that land in terms of using that for further borrowing.
Yeah. I can start with this one. So we'll typically value the farmland on balance sheets at whatever our appraisal's at. We have a great appraisal team so we have all the values, the average values in our area of Northwest Ohio, for the last year. So we have a pretty good idea of what the value is based on where the land's located. So that's kind of what we'll use on our financial analysis. Then as far as collateral, we lend our typical standard is 70% loan to value is kind of where we're at right now at Ag Credit.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
Barry. So our program, obviously we don't do an appraisal on the farmland, and so we're really just kind of taking that self-reported number, and it's very interesting. As I said, I've got some farms that are in a very strong financial position and not maybe carrying any debt. They're very slow to adjust that market value up in the good times. And I think that's kind of one of the other things that we work with our customers or clients on is you know, avoiding wild swings year to year on market value. And we've certainly seen some pretty dramatic increases in farmland values in certain areas of the state. But yeah, just because you heard the local last auction price was, $17,000 an acre. That's maybe not the number we want to put in as the market value on all of our land for the balance sheet. And so really, slow incremental changes to market values on land is kind of the area that we operate from. But again, we also look at a cost value of, what did it cost when you purchased that land? And that might have been a generation ago. So.
Yeah, farmland and real estate can certainly skew things as far as giving us an unclear picture of how maybe the actual business did in the last 5 or 10 years, because farmland itself, if there's some in that balance sheet, it's going to show well, you did a tremendous job in growing your equity, where in some cases it was just the market, right? So we know that from the past. Okay, we're drawing to the end of our time. I'd like to give you both some time to talk about what you've seen in the last, the recent past here in terms of change, not only for probably your crop producers, but any other insight into what you're seeing and from other growers, if you have thoughts that you could share on improvement or improvement that's been followed by more recent erosion in equity. Josh, would you care to comment on, a little bit on that?
Sure. So yeah, the last couple of years with the drop in commodity prices, our producers that we see have taken a toll. Now, by nature, we're seeing the ones that are the most levered, so that they're going to be the ones that are impacted the most.
Yeah.
Um, with $4, I think we use $4.30 corn for our projection and 10.50 beans, pretty close to where we're at. On average, we run a compare comparison, and after servicing all debts and everything, I think the loss was $80 to $100 an acre on average for the our set of peer data for last year.
Could you repeat that number again? How much?
Yeah, on average, the loss. So after all expenses are paid and all debt service and family livings taken out of that and taxes are paid, it's between $80 to $100 an acre is what we see. And that covered, I think we're about 40,000 acres in that peer comparison over about 40 producers. So
Challenging, definitely challenging
yeah,
times.
it is a challenging. What we've really seen is the erosion of working capital, not so much equity, because as you mentioned, land still continues to climb. It's the working capital that has, went to break even or negative for a lot, and that's where we really start running into troubles because that's what pays the bills, as we all know.
Yeah.
So when working capital goes negative, we got some work to do.
More operating loans, I'm guessing. That's certainly in
Yeah.
the mix.
Yeah, for a lender, sometimes it's a good thing, but sometimes you never want to rely on your lender to fund the full year's crop. So that's never a good thing.
Thanks, Josh. Clint, what are you
Yeah.
seeing?
So right now, we're just starting the collection for the 2025 year. But I just know from our database, Josh mentioned working capital. If we combined all of the farms that participated in our program in 2024 over the calendar year 2024, if we average that out, the average farm lost $35,500 in working capital. So, that's certainly an area for concern because I think 2025 is going to be worse as those numbers start to come in. But yeah, I I know that we completed the 2024 data and corn net returns were negative for the average farm that we had about uh, it was close to $40. And so oh boy, I always mess up the acronyms. The ECAP payment, if you
Yeah.
if you coupled that in, the farm made maybe $1 or $2 an
Mm,
acre. So
mm.
net returns before those government payments were negative. And I think that's going to be very similar to what we see was we get into this 2025 data and really start to analyze that.
Certainly, yeah, and the bridge payments coming and the
Yep.
potential for more ARC payments in the fall. So certainly will be helpful in the light of this situation. So, okay, we're drawing this to a close, I know. And any last comments, Josh, Clint, before we wrap up this session?
No, I guess last comment I'll make is on working capital. If there's one thing I could put an emphasis on for any producers is really, really watch that working capital and really put a focus on managing that working capital. I know I'm a big Warren Buffett guy, and one of his things, working capital is like oxygen. When you have it, you really don't notice it, but when you don't have it, you notice it every day. So just keep
Yes,
that in mind.
Yeah.
quickly. Clint, last thought.
No, I just appreciate Josh coming on and joining us today because that's always good to get the outside view. A lot of the things we discuss, it's good to hear outside or in the industry, they're seeing the same kind of issues and problems that we kind of see as we talk about things internally. So,
Well, thanks, Clint. Thank you, Josh, for joining us. We really appreciate your time and interest, and I know all of our participants are happy to hear all of your thoughts. So, David, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Great. Great insight, gentlemen. I can't believe people don't love to go through their financials more. That's just so surprising to me. So, but excellent. We really enjoy our partnerships throughout our industry because we all work basically for the same people, and that's our farmers here in the state of Ohio. Well, speaking of helping our farmers in the state of Ohio, I'm going to give a quick update on the Farmer Bridge Assistance Program, as well as then move in to some of the federal farm program update. Now, last month in December, we were on right after the announcement of the Farmer Bridge Assistance Program for those bridge payments that were going to be made. Notice of $11 billion for row crops for us here across the country, and then $1 million for their specialty crops. Now, as I talked to our friends at the FSA, the details that we shared last month, the details that you have seen in the media, those are the details that they have. But here's what we know as of today. Those payments are expected by the end of February. Hopefully they're a Valentine's gift for you. Know that the acreage reporting was due by December 19th. Now, my question was to our FSA partners was, what happens if I didn't make sure that my acreage was reported correctly? And that's an answer that when the rules are distributed down through the system, we'll know more to that. There is a payment limitations and as well as an adjusted gross income cap like most of our federal programs. Now, last month we shared those payment rates, and those payment rates, for instance, will highlight like corn at $44.36, soybeans at $30.88, and wheat at $39.35. Some people will say that the market took back that payment this week. If you listen to some of our friends in the grain marketing world with the NASS report that came out Monday. So there has been chatter, and there's been chatter throughout the farm community. I hope you saw this morning our friends at Farm Doc at the University of Illinois have a really nice article this morning in their policy side talking about what is next. And there's been, will there be more? Well, what is the bridge payments bridging us to? Well, many would say maybe it's bridging us to another payment. And looking at the article, and there is the link, and hopefully one of my counterparts will drop that link down into the chat for you so that you have it. Interesting article to read that both the Republicans as well as the Democrats, of course, they have different proposals, but to note is that both have proposals that will be working through the system as we move forward, and it could be a doubling, over doubling of the Farmer Bridge Assistance programs. So keep your eyes on that. Keep your eyes here with us on Farm Office Live. I'm sure we'll be talking a little bit more about this in February. So we just have to kind of watch to see how those negotiations go in Congress. So flipping quickly to the Federal Farm Program update. Last month we shared a little bit about the ARC PLC payments. Of course, producers saw those payments for 2024. We know the 2024 payments would have showed up in October of 2025, always that rolling year behind. And what are we looking forwards as far as 2025 ARC PLC program payments? There should be some payments that we will see in October of 2026. Of course, we'll keep a pulse on that as we move forward. Our friend Carl Zuloff has been working with us to do estimations about what those payments will be, and we'll be making some of those estimations again for this 2025 payment. But no, the decision point was mute because OB3 in that legislation said that farmers will get paid the greater, and I see a little typo, the greater of the ARC or PLC payment for the 2025 crop. So regardless of the program that you selected, you'll receive the higher payment. Interesting note, again, chatter throughout Congress about the 2026 ARC PLC payments. Of course, OB3 made some differences, some changes to the federal farm program as far as base acres, raising the PLC prices. So it's going to take some time to implement those rules. So what we are hearing out of Washington, D.C. is that expect a delay in the sign up for the 2026 ARC PLC program payments. Note that usually that's mid-January, where we are today, mid-January through mid-April. Some are saying that you'll have the crop in the ground and you'll know exactly, you'll have really good decision making ability by the time we get to the 2026 ARC PLC program. But again, it's just another program that we'll be following for you. Just a reminder of some of the things that Barry, Jeff, and I have been talking out at our tax schools across the state about some of the major OB3 provisions. Well, we know there's enrollment for the 30 million new base acres. We're watching that. There was the raising of the PLC reference prices. Of course, those reference prices you can see there on your screen as far as the chart on how those are being raised, like for instance, corn is up to $4.10, 11% change. Know that those are the reference price, effective reference price for PLC through the 2030 crop year. After that, those reference prices are going to be bumped by 0.5% per year. Also raised the benchmark guarantee for the ARC payments up to 90%. And there was some additions to coverage in our crop insurance program, which we have talked about. Just as a reminder that we're not out of the drought, even though we're seeing some rain, we're seeing some snow, we're seeing some sleet. This was the chart that Aaron Wilson shared with us to share with you today from earlier this week about drought conditions, still in Northwest Ohio, a little here on the eastern side of the state as well. But know the drought conditions are still impactful, so we're still getting our way out of that. But know that the livestock forage program, that program has been really important to our cattle producers for grazing losses. Know that there are eligible counties for 2025, and those 24 Ohio counties that you see on the screen, those are mainly those Ohio counties in the northwest part of the state. But the sign up for that program, for the livestock forage program, so if you're a producer in those counties, know that you can check in with your Farm Service Agency office and check into that livestock forage program. Also for our dairy folks, the Dairy Margin Coverage Program, the sign up began this week, and that's going to be through the end of next month. And we'll update you even more next month as well. But know there have been some changes to the Dairy Margin Coverage Program for our dairy farmers. The Tier 1 levels have increased to 6 million pounds. So Tier 1, that used to be at 5 million pounds. A note that all operations will have to set a new production history. So that is going to be the highest of a 3-year period. And if my memory serves me right, that is 21, 22, 23. Yeah, because it's right there on the screen. But you have to show the production evidence. And then new in this year's Dairy Margin Coverage Program, producers have the ability to lock in coverage for a 6-year period. So from 26 through 31, they get a premium discount of 25%. If you go on the farmers.gov website for the USDA, you can pull access to this. But as producers, there is a nice calculator for them to use based on their production history, as well as what is the premium charge going to be. So you can see that there on the screen, all the way of the coverage at the $4 level, all the way up to $9.50. You can see that price changes, and it will show you the calculation for you. So the folks that are dairy farmers will want to check out that calculator for sure and start to get into the Farm Service Agency office and do your sign up. And then just as a reminder, the county committees, we got ours in the mail here this week. The ballots for your county elections. Know that those county committees are so important in the work that the USDA FSA office does. So your vote does matter as a producer. Know those ballots should have showed up this week into your mailbox. If not, you might want to check in with your FSA office to see why you haven't received that. Know that those need to be postmarked by February 2nd or returned into your local FSA office by February 2nd. So you have a couple weeks to do that, and then those new members will take office as we move into March. And then I believe the last thing on my list before I turn it over to Robert Moore, know that the Supplemental Disaster Relief Program, this is just a reminder, we revisited about this last month on Farm Office Live, but the Supplemental Disaster Relief Program, SDRP-2, gotta love all the acronyms. Know that Stage 1 sign up goes through the end of April. And notice that there are 56 out of the 88 counties here in the state of Ohio that would be eligible. That is the disaster relief program because of drought classifications that we have. So there's more information there that you can receive from your Farm Service Agency office, but of particular note, our friends wanted to make sure that you knew about the SDRP2. So if those are in alphabetical order for you. So if you see your county on there, you can check out with that with the local FSA office. So with that, that is your farmer Bridge assistance program, your federal farm program update. What we say now is keep your eyes open, keep your ears up, because every day something can change. So eyes open, ears up. With that, Robert, speaking of eyes open, mediation and clauses and lawyers
Okay.
and tigers and bears, oh my, right?
Right. All right. Today we're going to talk a little bit about mediation and arbitration. I came up with this idea because I know I was guilty of this when I was working with clients, is sometimes we just kind of throw in mediation and arbitration clauses into leases and contracts, and maybe we don't give quite enough thought to them. So just wanted to have a brief discussion on these clauses that can be in your contract, what they are, and then we're going to have a discussion with Peggy and Jeff just to get their thoughts and ideas and how they've used them. So let me see if I can. Okay. So first, let's talk about what the differences are. So mediation is a voluntary process. So this is where two people have a dispute of some kind. They engage a neutral party, and that neutral party basically helps the parties communicate, pushes and pulls them towards a mutually agreeable resolution, if possible. Sometimes the mediator sits at a table and the two parties are there. Sometimes the mediator will put the parties in different rooms and shuttle back and forth. Just depends on the situation. The best thing about mediation is it's usually fairly inexpensive and it's fast. Maybe it'll take a few hours, maybe it'll take a day, but other than the cost of the mediator, there's really no other cost. And if it's successful, it is the quickest, fastest, easiest way to resolve issues, and it is confidential. Under Ohio law, mediators cannot disclose the contents of the mediation, and those discussions cannot end up being discussed in a lawsuit either. Cons, non-binding, so no guarantee it's going to work. It can add an extra step, does take some time to do, and it requires a good faith participation. If somebody shows up to a mediation and they're like, I don't care, I'm not going to settle this today, then mediation's a waste of time. So it really requires parties to have good faith that they want to resolve the issue. Arbitration's a little less known, a little less common. But what arbitration is, the way I explain it is, it's kind of a mini private trial. And this is where you engage a third party, an arbitrator. Sometimes it's one person. It can be a panel of three people, just depending on how you want to do it. But basically, the parties make their argument to the arbitrator, and then the arbitrator serves as the decision maker, the judge, and the decision that the arbitrator comes up with, that's what the parties are bound to. The pros, definitely faster than litigation. Maybe takes months instead of years, which litigation can sometimes take. It's going to be cheaper. It is final and binding, so the parties agree ahead of time. Hey, whatever the arbitrator comes up with, that's the decision. It is binding. We can't just tear up the decision. It's also confidential and private, like mediation, and parties can choose expert arbitrators. An example of this is most grain contracts, if there's a dispute, must be arbitrated through National Grain and Feed Association. Those arbitrators are usually attorneys that have a lot of expertise in grain contracts, so you usually get the right decision. Cons, upfront costs can be high. So arbitrators do cost money. A lot of times they're, again, attorneys, retired judges. They're going to have a considerable hourly rate, and then administrative cost of getting ready for the arbitration. Limited discovery. So discovery is where you can ask the other party for evidence. Say, hey, we're in a dispute. I want to see your tax returns. You can do that in a lawsuit. Arbitration, it depends on the parties, but a lot of times that's limited. So that results in maybe a little more less likely of an outcome, of a good outcome. And then limited appeal rights. Usually you can't appeal an arbitration decision. So whatever the decision is, that's what you're stuck with, whether you like it or not. If we don't do either mediation or litigation, or if mediation fails, then we go to litigation, and this is your typical lawsuit. One party files a lawsuit against the other. We go to court. It takes a long time. But the pros are you get a final resolution. You do get discovery. So you get everything the other party has that is relevant to your case. Discovery is a really important part of the litigation process. It helps ensure that we come to the right decision. You can appeal your litigation decision. So if you think the judge made a procedural error of some kind, or the law wasn't quite applied right, you can appeal that and kind of get a second chance on some issues with the litigation. And we get broader remedies. Judges can issue injunctions and other remedies that we wouldn't get with mediation or arbitration. Cons, just time consuming, expensive. What people don't realize about litigation a lot of times is the stress. If you've never been deposed, it is very stressful because the attorney can ask you anything related to the matter. You are under oath, and the attorney is going to try a lot of times kind of trip you up, get some inconsistencies. Very stressful, very expensive. So if we can, we should try to avoid litigation. Okay, so how are mediation and arbitration used? So we can use mediation, then arbitration. So what I mean, right in the contract, it would say, hey, if we have a dispute, we're going to go through mediation. If mediation doesn't work, then we're going to use arbitration. If we go that path, we're not going to have litigation. There's not going to be a lawsuit, because ultimately, if the mediation doesn't work, whatever the arbitration comes up with, that's going to be the decision. We can use mediation only and no arbitration. So then if the mediation doesn't work, then we'll go to the lawsuit. We can use arbitration only, skip the process of mediation, do arbitration. Whatever arbitration comes up, that's our decision. We would not file a lawsuit. If the contract neither addresses mediation nor arbitration, then any disputes would go to litigation. Now, the parties are always can always voluntarily engage in mediation, and I suppose arbitration. But if they don't, if one party or both parties don't want to do mediation or arbitration, then it would go just to litigation. So that's the end of my slides. So what I want to do now is bring in Jeff and Peggy, and we've had this discussion once in a while about are mediation and arbitration clauses good. I've tended to be on the side of I think we should have mediation and arbitration in our clauses. Peggy and I over the years have debated this. Peggy tends, I think, to be a little less favorable towards arbitration. I will say she has swayed me. I've come that way a little bit. But Jeff has done a lot of work on contracts and has seen arbitration and mediation clauses in the contract. So, Peggy, what's your thought on mediation, arbitration? Should we have them in our contracts and leases?
Oh, I think generally they can be a good tool. I think you just, as with all things legal, have to be careful about which tool you use and how it's written and where your venue will be. I definitely like mediation. I think that can be a quick and easy way to resolve something, for example, for a farm lease disagreement. But one of the problems we run into with mediation clauses is you really can't find those kind of low cost free mediators, for example, some, local friends or farm management folks who would have that knowledge. So you do end up having to pay a mediator. So I think sometimes they're written with good intentions, but maybe not always realistic about who you can get to mediate that type of dispute when we're talking mediation. And we can talk a little bit more about our offers program that tries to get around that problem. But when we look at arbitration clauses, that's where Robert and I have sparred a little over the years, because I did a few arbitrations when I was in private practice. Now, I did not do one before National Grain and Feed Association. I think that organization has an outstanding reputation for arbitration, resolving conflicts through arbitration. But the different ones that I did in private practice, I found incredibly frustrating, just as long and drawn out as court would be, probably more expensive. And in the end, I felt very much unfair. So I think it depends, is the answer, Robert, that I would give on arbitration. It really depends where that arbitration will go and what their rules are. For example, if you look at NGFA, they have their own trade rules that they will be interpreting within the context of that arbitration and that contract. And that's all very transparent and I think pretty fair. But as I said, in some other places I've had to do arbitration, I did not think that they were written fairly and found it very frustrating. Those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. The mediator or arbitrator having some expert knowledge or technical knowledge of the matter is really important, because if they don't, I think they may have limited effectiveness. I'm thinking of I did a FSA appeal one time related to a wetland, and we did an mediation. The mediator had no clue what a wetland is.
Oh, goodness.
No clue about FSA rules, and it was really a waste of time. Whereas if the mediator, would have been familiar with wetlands and FSA rules, they really could have helped us. So that's a good point. Maybe we should add that into our mediation and arbitration clause, that the chosen person has to have some technical expertise. Jeff, you've done a lot of contracts. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think all of this is a double-edged sword. So even in my time clerking for judges, even if there's not a mediation clause, the judge will mandate mediation before it goes further into discovery or trial. So then you've spent all this money on this attorney and all this time already, and now you're going to mediation and maybe resolve things through mediation. And then you're like, well, what the heck? So I think it all boils down to what you are comfortable with, I guess. So mediation, I think a lot of times is more to preserve the relationship you might have with another party. I think it's less adversarial, and hopefully that both parties can come to a conclusion that is beneficial to both or meets some of the needs of both. With arbitration and litigation, you get into one side wins, the other side loses, right? So it gets very adversarial. With the arbitration stuff, I think, we're all human. We all have biases. And even with a professional, they might have had a personal story similar to what they're arbitrating, being the judge of. And I think that is more prevalent in arbitration than I would say litigation, because if you're in front of a jury, you're hopefully be able to persuade a majority of them to your side, whatever it might be. But I think there's more, even though there's more people and there's more biases, I think you can, like the average, you know what I mean? It averages out, whereas you just have that one arbitrator or the three or whatever it might be. And the rules and stuff, I think with arbitration make it difficult. As a previous litigator, the rules of evidence and stuff that, we come to memorize and live by are not the same in arbitration. And so it kind of throws even an experienced attorney for a loop when it comes to those kinds of things. So I also think when it comes to like the payment and stuff, I have written a few contracts where you can spell out who's going to be financially responsible. So I've seen contracts and I've written clauses where it's the party claiming a breach will be responsible for the arbitration or the cost of mediation or whatever it might be, if you're going to force those kinds of things.
Mhm. Well, I think we would all agree, if you can resolve your differences through mediation, that's always best, because even if you have an expert mediator, they may get it wrong. And I've told this to many people. If you go to litigation, the law may be on your side, the facts may be on your side, you may have a winning case, but you take it in front of a jury, maybe they like the other party better than you and they rule against you. So once you go to arbitration or litigation, it is out of your hands, and there is no way you can know if you're going to win or not. So settling it through mediation, I think, is always preferable. Any thoughts on that, Peggy?
I agree. I agree. And then I think we should also talk about another approach, and that is to have some type of right to cure clause in the contract as well, that says if there is a dispute, the first step we need to take is notify that other party of the dispute and give them a right to correct that. And then if it's not corrected, then we can go on to mediation. I think those two work really well together in a lot of our ag contracts.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of times it'll be, like in a lease, you have 30 days to remedy this default or issue before it goes to litigation or whatever. Yeah, good point. I think we ought to wrap up. Jeff, any final thoughts on arbitration, mediation? How do you explain it to your clients?
Well, I try to explain it that I want to give them the most protection I can. So I'm going to draft a contract, and negotiations happen afterwards, but I'm going to draft it in a way that makes or keeps them as safe as possible, less financial burden, all that stuff. But I think, to Peggy's point, and I kind of want to deviate from this, but I think this highlights the importance of what we do as attorneys, because you can craft these clauses and your contract to meet your needs. And I know we have AI and the wonder of AI, and I don't think AI would be as crafty and unique to each individual. So just be wary of that. And I think this highlights that issue.
Okay.
And Robert, you want to talk a little bit about offers and what we can do through that? I'm putting that in the chat for everyone.
Okay. We've talked about it before, but we'll talk about it again. Probably some people haven't heard about offers, but let's see, about 2 years ago now, we started the Ohio Farm Resolution Service. It's a program through USDA. And Jeff, Peggy, David, Ellen, and I are mediators. And what we do is, if somebody has a dispute, whether that's a lease dispute, property dispute, whatever kind of dispute related to farm and agricultural issues, we can be a mediator. And what hopefully we can do is bring some legal knowledge and technical knowledge to the mediation, and hopefully find a resolution. So if maybe if there is an FSA wetland dispute, we can provide a mediator that knows something about wetland regulations with FSA and has a better chance of resolving that issue. So Peggy put a link in the chat there to the program. And it doesn't have to be you're in the middle of a lawsuit mediation. It can be, you've just discovered a dispute and you don't want to go to mediation. We can help that kind of resolution. We also do a lot of education. You can say, hey, I've got neighbors' branches are over my property line. Can I cut them or not? We can send you education to help resolve that issue. And then we also do a lot of farm transition planning work, especially David goes out, meets with families at their kitchen table and try to help them move on, either start or complete their farm transition network. So if you ever find yourself needing just some help, might be inner family issues, maybe a dispute with a neighbor, maybe dispute with FSA, USDA, ODA. We can provide mediators to help resolve those issues, hopefully before they go to litigation. All right. Any final thoughts?
No.
Okay. Well, that does it for us. And I should know who we're going to next. Let's see. But I don't.
We are gonna
David,
turn
you want
it-
to help me out?
We're going to turn it to Bruce. I
Okay.
believe.
Bruce.
Am I right, Bruce?
Yeah, sure.
I'm right.
Yep, sounds great. Thanks, Robert and Peggy and Jeff for that, and David. Appreciate that transition. We're going to bring in, I'm going to bring in a few of my colleagues that have been working on a product for an article for the Ohio Ag Manager. I'm going to bring in David and Clint and our special guest, Garth McDorman. And I guess is sometimes we get this energy in the new year, and as a farm manager, how do we focus some of that energy on the farm management related things that might make small incremental improvements in the farm operation, maybe little bits at a time? And so what we've drafted and put together is a top 10 list of areas in farm management that we may want to focus in on for 2026. And this segment of Farm Office Live, we're going to kind of give you a sneak peek or a preview to that article, and we're going to talk about 4 or 5 of them and kind of grease the wheels a little bit on some of the things that we can focus in on for the upcoming year for farm management. There are so many reasons why good reasons to focus on farm management, and kind of the emphasis of this discussion is to go beyond those having good reasons to do it and actually go out and do it and focus in on a few of those things. So I think we're going to start off with Garth, our special guest from Allen County, Ohio. Welcome, Garth McDorman. You've been with Extension. Give us a little bit of background, Garth, of your career prior to coming to Extension, and also your position that you currently hold with OSU Extension.
Yes. Yeah. Appreciate you all having me today and look forward to the conversation, of course. Garth McDorman, born and raised here in Allen County. So it's kind of nice to get back to the roots here and give back here. I graduated from OSU Columbus in 2015. Shortly thereafter, got a good start in the grain industry. Worked for a few companies in the ethanol business, and as well as the cash grain business as well with another company. Spent nearly 10 years in that realm of work in that industry, and decided to do a change of pace and come here, and look forward to being a part of this here today as well. So,
So for sure, and that was one of your background and your expertise is a lot of the reason we certainly wanted to bring you into the discussion and writing the article, but really the primer today on writing a grain marketing plan. I think sometimes grain marketing in and of itself is scary, let alone writing something down and executing a plan. So I wonder if you could give us a little highlights as why that may be a focus for 2026.
Yeah, we'll do. And, throughout my career, we emphasize writing grain marketing plans to a lot of our customers, and there's benefit in doing so, right? And the one thing I think we'd always highlight is emphasizing 3 main goals, right, of any marketing plan. I would say maximize profits, right? Everybody wants to make a little bit of money. That's what we're in it for, I guess. And then I definitely want to manage some risk, right? And there's certainly multiple ways to do that, and I won't go into too much detail about how to do that today, but could have a conversation at a later time on that for sure. And also maintaining some timely cash flow. And I would say I'd put some emphasis on the 2 to start there, the maximizing profits and managing risk. And I don't want to undervalue, the timely cash flow piece, but cash flow can come from certainly other places as far as different revenue streams on the farm, or maybe even a line of credit from firms like Josh's here earlier in the call, right? But I'd say have your balance sheet ready, or they're not going to be even looking at you to do that. So, with those 3 goals in mind, right? How do we want to? I guess what steps are we willing to take to accomplish those goals? And One thing that I think, and probably the most important step I would say here today, is going to be establishing our operations production, and that not only the total bushels that we're going to produce, right, but also the cost to do so. That I think once we are able to do that, then that'll give us an outline on how we can properly manage and sell those bushels throughout the year. After that, I would say we should be looking at setting some price targets, and I would say emphasize realistic price targets. So, and what I mean by that, if current market conditions, right, we're currently trading 420 on the board, and we know our cost of production is, say, 435, for instance. So we're currently trading below that, and current market conditions, the USDA just printed over a 98 million bushel or 98 million acre number at 186.5 yield. That puts production above 17 billion bushels at an average farm price of 410. I would say a realistic price target's not going to be 550, right? So maybe a realistic one of let's try to get to our break even and sell there first, or maybe 15, 20 cents above our break even. And sometimes a realistic price target is going to be below our break even point, but by selling some bushels, we are going to start to manage some risk here and not lose more or potentially lose more, right? And then after that, setting our price targets, we need to be setting deadlines, not only for those said price targets, but also for when we need to sell bushels by. And that's not only for a logistics standpoint, but also for that timely cash flow potentially. So that's the next step I would say. And then after that, I would say almost to finalize it here is write it down. Let's write down that grain marketing plan, right? Let's not just have it in the back of our mind and then let it kind of fall by the wayside. And then after it's written down, let's execute it. And, even if you only execute one piece of that grain marketing plan, right, you'll start to get into a groove and build trends within yourself to follow it more closely in the future. And then if you do have trouble with, kind of executing it yourself, maybe share that plan with someone else, like that's going to hold you accountable. Maybe a trusted grain buyer you've been dealing with for years, your significant other, or even your local OSU county educator, right? So anybody that can hold you accountable and can help you get there, I think is great. That's all I really had today. Tune into the Ohio Ag Manager articles and maybe learn a little bit more than what I shared here today. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out.
That's great. Yeah, Garth, thanks. That written plan doesn't have to be complex. It can be a front side of a sheet of paper. And so it can be your plan, you own it, and you execute it as you see fit. Thanks, Garth. Let's jump gears over to Clint Schrader again, a friend, and one of his key focus areas is going to be on analyzing farm profit. We talked about already the balance sheets today, but you also alluded to that accrual adjusted income statement and things of that sort. What are some of the tools that we could do to analyze profitability? Sometimes in our rearview mirror, though, right, Clint?
Yeah, so that's what our program really does is we're always looking behind, analyzing the year that most recently happened. And I know we have a number of tax professionals or tax preparers on the call today. And so I have to share that Bruce is commonly saying that the Schedule F is a terrible financial document and shouldn't be utilized to make decisions off of. Those are Bruce's words, not mine. But
it's true. I've said it.
Yeah. So, and the reason that Bruce or myself or any of our farm management team maybe, says some not so nice things about a Schedule F form on a tax return is that's really tracking net cash income. And the number that we want to get to is the net farm income. And really what that does is that takes into consideration, okay, the dollars coming in and going out gives us our cash income, but what are the other things that change throughout the year? What was our beginning inventory of grain stored on hand or prepaid seed and chemical and other supplies that have already been paid for? And then also factoring in, we talked about machinery depreciation earlier and that economic depreciation of that equipment. Taking those two things into consideration, a lot of studies have been done. I know Texas A&M, their program did a lot of work, and they, had theorized that it's maybe a 2 to 3 year lag time when you're just using a cash income to make decisions off of instead of a net farm income. And really the reason for this is, over a couple years, you can start to really build up accounts payable. You're stretching out that unsecured credit. You're not paying your bills as timely. Maybe you're not replacing equipment as it wears out, or the other one would be you have assets that you're selling because you need to generate cash flow, and so we're decreasing that equipment inventory potentially. So that can really take a couple years to really that problem to present itself if you're not looking at your net farm income as opposed to a cash income. And so I think that's kind of the first step is understanding how do we get to that number. That's the work my program does. But that's kind of at the whole farm side. The other thing I would mention is then how do we get to that next level where we're doing the enterprise? Is each crop you grow, how do you look at profitability on that? When do you kind of make those decisions? And understanding how to allocate some of those overhead costs and those type of things across the acre, so you can come up with a good number as far as profit potential. As you build a projection maybe going forward.
Very good, Clint. Appreciate those highlights, and that'll be a part of our article as well. And profitability is going to be best recorded and best analyzed with that accrual adjusted income statement. So yeah, sometimes I am critical of there's a purpose to the Schedule F. It has its own purpose. It's just not necessarily analysis of profitability. David, let's jump over to you and switch gears to the love of your career, and that is farm transition. And sometimes you describe it as kind of the chaos that happens within families in the farm business. And so speak to a little bit about, if you would, kind of that time of year to review that transition plan and also the estate plan.
Yeah, sure. First, I was going to say I'm the farm office team member that gets to talk about death and taxes. So when you say Schedule F, my ears perk up. I said, yes, let's talk about the Schedule F. This is fun. As with some of the people on the call, want to talk about the Schedule F, our good tax professionals that come to Jeff and Barry's tax schools. Hey, you look at the beginning of the year, you're always setting your SMART goals, right? And as producers, as managers, we're setting our SMART goals when it comes to our personal lives. And maybe if we have an off-farm job, then that's part of our work, but also setting those good goals for the farm business for the new year. And Robert and I both would so encourage you to take a look at that transition estate plan, especially we know that the risk of federal estate tax has been minimized by the OB3. So that is not a reason not to pay attention to your state plan. And we have a workshop to talk about how do we methodically, systematically transfer the farm to the next generation, set them up for success after our time as the lead key manager on the business is over. So we would encourage, and we will show these in the program updates as we close out today's Farm Office Live, that the Planning for the Future Your Farm course that we have is a great time to go back through and look through your estate plan. So we have options that are around the state. We will have a program. Well, Logan County started this on Wednesday night, and it finishes on next Wednesday night with Robert. Still time to get in there if you want to hear the second half of that. But then we'll be bouncing through Muskingum, Washington, Morrow, and Madison County for in-person workshops. And that's where you can come and just learn more and just put everything together. Know also that this is be the 6th year that we do an online Zoom on Monday evenings in the winter. Usually we've done that in February. This year we're going to bounce that to March. So March 2nd, 9th, 16th, and 23rd, you can sign up for that. If you want to just sit at home, like this wonderful Zoom opportunity that we have here. And then the third one, and the one that we're really super excited about, is we just unleashed the new self-paced online course. So you can take a course in this farm transition and estate planning at a time and at a place that is convenient to you, just through Ohio State's Scarlet Canvas course, so you can enroll in that. I would say if people want to learn more, just go to go.osu.edu/farm succession, and you can see all those. But also, we have been talking here on Farm Office Live, if you haven't heard about the new farm spreadsheet. Well, this is consolidating everything. So this bounces into the discussion on the balance sheet, but essentially you're pulling together that estate balance sheet. The farm spreadsheet allows you to do that. We have developed it. Robert and I put it together based on advice that we received from farmers, and it is available. So if you go to farmoffice.osu.edu, you can look at the top bar under farm transition and find the link to that to be able to watch a quick video and download it and then use that for your efforts. If you're unclear about how to use it, then you can talk to Robert and I, and we'd be happy to help you with that. So even though the federal estate tax went up because of OB3, my caution, Robert's caution, it still doesn't mean you shouldn't review that plan each and every year. Hey, speaking of putting things together, now let me bounce it back to you, Bruce. Like, you're like our king on record keeping. Clint already said that about, let your records do more than a tax return. So what about record keeping when it comes to this new year that we're into?
Yeah, I would agree. It's one of the areas that I would emphasize in farm management to examine our record keeping system. First off, we kind of talk about the financial side of a record keeping system, and I have been pretty tough on the IRS Schedule F form, but it's a fairly generic set of numbers that we send the IRS for that purpose. And I think many farm managers may want a deeper dive and do often have a deeper dive into what their numbers can and should tell them. My challenge for 2026 is to examine the farm's chart of accounts. And a chart of accounts is how we would organize our income and expenses. And I would challenge producers to have that chart of accounts set up so that it can funnel and identify those income and expenses down to the enterprise level. And even possibly go that next step into market channel. Where did the revenue come from? Whether that was for grain, our local elevator, or with the ethanol plant or the crush facility. We have a lot of options in several places. And have we fully examined where the benefits of going to different income streams and selling of our product? Our chart of accounts may also allow us to detail field location, as well as livestock enterprises, or even which group of production within that livestock enterprise. Also like to have folks establish a consistent method of allocating overhead costs, things like fuel and repairs and machinery, supplies and taxes. How do we allocate those to certain enterprises and have a consistent method within our accounting system to account for those overhead costs that if we just throw them all into overhead, it may not get us to the cost of production that we actually need to do some marketing and other strategies on the farm. So I mentioned that the first bucket of record keeping is the financial record. I would also challenge folks to consider how our production records can and should be coupled with our financial decision making as well. Let me give you an example. On a fed cattle example, our financial records would provide us the feed cost per ton. But what if we can combine it with our production records, and the farm manager then could determine the cost of feed per pound of gain? It's one of the standard measures of efficiency in cattle production. Another example in corn production would be, yes, our financial records can provide us with the nitrogen cost per ton, but then combine that with the records to determine nitrogen use efficiency at the field level. How many bushels were produced because we provided so many pounds of nitrogen for that particular field, and determine an efficiency factor, and that be another layer of informed decision making. So again, David, this article is we just highlighted 4 today of the 10 areas. And so this is just that sneak preview that we would encourage our viewers today and our readers at Ohio Ag Manager to investigate that article. It will roll out here in the next couple of days, and we'll have that for everybody to enjoy and kind of plan their farm management focus for 2026.
Great. I appreciate Bruce you leading that panel discussion, and I'll say to all of our viewers here, one thing that you noticed today that we tried to include a few more panel discussions, some open discussions. We're trying to be creative. We're trying to improve your viewership. So we're going to ask you at the end, of course, at go.osu.edu/FOL evaluation, so Farm Office Live evaluation, your thoughts. So we're always interested in how you think, and we're interested today, particularly based on some of the panel discussions we had, how you like that approach. So for the final amount, we're going to bounce back to the PowerPoints because I just want to give you a quick 1099 reminder. As you can see, these are some thoughts that Barry and Jeff helped pull together. Just as a reminder, last year in January, we did an IRS 1099 form primer. So we talked a little bit about the 1099 forms, the 21 different forms that are there to basically help the IRS know what income is being received by folks. And we just recently wrote a farm office blog post on that last Friday that dropped, so you can go and review that article in depth. And hopefully one of my colleagues will also drop that in the chat for you. But just a reminder, these are some of the typical 1099s that we as producers receive: the 1099 non-employee compensation, NEC, the miscellaneous income, and then the 1099K, the income from third-party vendors. Some of ours that are marketing direct to consumers, especially the 1099K, might come into play. Many of us are familiar with the 1099G because that is where our government program payments like the ECAP payment will be reported. Also, if you had a state income tax refund last year, you'll get your 1099G. But also we have our others, our interest, our dividends, our patronage. If we do real estate transaction sales, of course, those would be reported to the IRS. And for those that don't know it, you can actually, as an individual taxpayer, you can log on to the IRS website and you can see everything that was reported as income in your name under your Social Security number. So you can log in, you get an account, you can get in, and they can actually see what has been reported. So at the end of this month might be an opportunity for you to do that, because our 1099s are due to the IRS by January 31st. These are just quick reminders. Generally, they're due, to the recipients by January 31st, generally due to the IRS by January 31st. Our 1099 miscellaneous they have a delayed reporting, and that allows you to do some reconciliation in case there's some changes that need to be made. But that needs to be by February 28th if it's paper, or March 31st if it's electronic. Know the penalties for not reporting a 1099. That can range from each report 1099 from $60 to $680. It goes up if they find that there was intentional disregard for reporting. And no, in 2023, so it's 3 years now, but if you have more than 3 1099s, then you need to file those electronically. So why are we talking about this today? Well, we're talking about this today because of OB3. OB3 made some revisions to the 1099 process as far as the reporting limits. However, know that if income is generated, that does not release you from your obligation of claiming that income. But for 1099 NECs, we know this is non-employee compensation. That has been $600 or greater. No, that is in play for this year as we report here in January for 2025. But know what's going to happen in 2026. So as we are in 2026, so next January we'll be saying, remember, the 1099 is up to $2,000. I think this is a very welcomed relief to many of us, and that's going to be indexed for inflation starting in 2027. So it'll be indexed for inflation. I think many of us will say hallelujah. Great to move that up. We have talked in the past about the 1099, so non-employee compensation. Those are not your employees. So make sure that you're doing your due diligence to look at the difference between what is an employee's, what is an independent contractor. Of course, we know as employees, we have a lot more due diligence as an employer with our withholdings for taxes and Social Security and Medicare and all that, and reporting those. So there has been a preference, of course, for employers to pay workers as independent contractors, as a 1099, non-employee compensation rather than an employee. But make sure that you're doing your review on that to know the difference between an employee and independent contractor. Complete guidance can be found at the IRS. That's publication 1779. Also note that the IRS will do a cursory review if you're unsure if a person should be a 1099 or an employee. They can do a review for you. And then the same thing holds true, and I forgot to put my slides forward because it's on a different screen. So there in your notes when you see them, the difference between employee and independent contractor, as well as the website that you can go to. Sorry about not flipping forward. So I want to say the same thing holds true to the 1099 miscellaneous. So those are where I think most of us as farmers would say, okay, that's for my rents. The rents, I'm renting that ground from these landlords. When do I have to issue a 1099 miscellaneous to them? And currently for 2025, again, reminder, that is $600 or more for rents. That increases to $2,000 in 2026. Again, that's going to be indexed for inflation. And then some of the other miscellaneous items like the royalties that we would get from oil and gas income, crop insurance proceeds, all those are going to stay the same. So just know that the 1099 miscellaneous, when it comes to like the rents, those that are in box 1, those will increase, as well as the NEC. And then if we go forward to the 1099K, we have been talking about this, has been up and down. In the old days, it was the reporting threshold was $20,000 and more than 200 transactions. And then we were in a period where it was to go down to $600. Then the IRS was only going to pay attention, was like $5,000. Well, the OB3 has reinstated that $20,000 and more than 200 transactions retroactive. So this, different than the others, is retroactive to 2022. So also have some notes in there about, you saw Venmo and some of those apps. We may be getting money from relatives. Those are not to be reported on the 1099K. So there's more guidance there on the website for you for those. So with that, we're up almost to our 11:30 hour. And I will say, even though we promote this from 10 to noon, our goal for the new year based on comments is to be finished by 11:30. So we have 2 minutes to talk about some winter programs and classes. Of course, I already mentioned the planning for the future of your farm. So those are in the slide decks. I invite you to either join us in person or online in March for the Zoom or the new Scarlet Canvas course. Again, great ways to talk about and learn about farm succession. And Robert mentioned offers, but we have a collaboration that has been meeting for a year and a half, and many of our collaborators are on today's program listening, but we are so pleased the Ohio Farm Transition Network. This is a group of individuals, professionals, dedicated to help farm families advance their transition estate plans, has come together to pull together the Ohio Farm Transition Network. Be watching on the Farm Office blog and through our other sources like Ag Credit and Farm Bureau and Nationwide and everybody else that has been part of that collaborative. We're going to have an official news release that's going to come out shortly on that. And part of our advancement of that is to improve the professional development of our professionals that are surrounding our farm operations. So we're going to hold a certified farm succession coordinator training in April in Worcester, and this is for folks, professionals who desire to become a certified farm transition coordinator through the International Farm Transition Network. This is an over 20-hour training. To help you, we have a great team coming in, Joy Kirkpatrick from the University of Wisconsin, and then Kylie Fleming, who is the Executive Director of the Iowa Mediation Services, will be in to help teach that program. You can become a certified farm succession coordinator after you take a test after the workshop. So we're inviting folks. We are 1/3 of the way already full for the seats that we have available for that. So if you want more information, don't hesitate to reach out to Robert or I. And for those attorneys who are on today, know that there are CLE credits for the entire program for your benefit. And then Garth and Bruce did a great job of talking about grain marketing, and that is an effort that we have been working on in earnest the last 2 years with support from Ohio Corn and Wheat and the Ohio Soybean Council. We thank our partners there. And because of that, our team has been able to put together the Basics of Grain Marketing online course. So not only are folks going around the state talking about marketing, but no, this is the year, right? This is the year that people have a lot of interest in grain marketing. There is a really, really cool grain marketing online course. That enrollment just opened up, and that actually just came live as we closed December. So really, really nice course for any of you that are looking to sharpen your skills in grain marketing. You can enroll in that. And Eric is leading our January session, our winter session of Farm On. So Farm On, the financial management course, has been around since 2023. So looking to sharpen those farm financial skills, you can go to go.osu/farm on to get more information about that. And then Bruce will be bouncing around the state doing farm accounting workshops. So those that want to improve your record keeping based on what you heard today, as far as where do you sharpen your focus, know that those workshops are going to be all around, from Henry to Stark to Union, Preble to Brown to Summit to Muskingum County. Across the state. Bruce takes a computer lab with him to help folks learn about accounting with Quicken. So if that's something that might interest you, we would encourage you to go to that Go link, go.osu.edu/Quicken. And then last but not least, our Food Business Central. We have a lot of food entrepreneurs, people that are thinking to sell food, to raise food, to whether that be meat, poultry, eggs, cottage food products. Well, Peggy and a team of folks have the Food Business Central course. That would be perfect for you as you start your year. I know that course is our price bargain for enrollment. Go to go.osu.edu/Food Business Central to check that out. And with that, we thank you for joining us on today's Farm Office Live. I don't believe I see any Q&A or questions that are in the chat, so we would remind you to fill out the evaluation at go.osu.edu/Farm Office Live evaluation. You'll probably get an email from me and say, thank you for attending today's program. Will you fill this out? Again, we're really interested in what you think about today's program and your thoughts for topics that we can discuss in the future. And know that our next upcoming webinars we have for the spring, we haven't planned for the entire year, but here's the upcoming ones: February 13th, March 13th, April 17th. So those are our 3 upcoming Farm Office Live webinars. Again, you can go to the farmoffice.osu.edu/Farm Office Live, and you can get the recordings as we mentioned there in the beginning. So again, we appreciate your support of OSU Extension and of today's program. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop your questions to any of our Farm Office team. You can find all of our contact information on that. Again, I feel like a NASCAR driver, farmoffice.osu.edu. And thank you for joining today's program. Have a great weekend.